For centuries, Mary Magdalene has been painted as the fallen woman, a sinner, a prostitute, a shadow trailing behind the footsteps of men. But that story was not truth, it was propaganda. In the year 591, Pope Gregory declared her a whore from the pulpit. With a single sermon, her memory was defiled, her name chained to shame, so her light could never shine again. The church needed her silenced, because Mary carried something Rome could never control. She carried the hidden gnosis, the flame of sovereignty. Mary was not a servant to men, she was the flame beside the flame, the mirror to the Christ energy, the balance that Rome erased. She was called the apostle to the apostles, the one who carried the hidden gnosis when the others scattered in fear. Mary did not bow to the system, she carried the bloodline. She carried the codes of remembrance, the womb as temple, the body as flame. She was never meant to be shamed, she was meant to be crowned. Mary spoke of a kingdom not in the sky, not locked in temples, but within. The Gospel of Mary, hidden for centuries, tells us that salvation was never through priests or Rome. It was through remembrance. She taught that the soul rises by releasing the chains of fear, of desire, of ignorance, that the true journey begins when you silence the archons inside. This was dangerous knowledge, because it freed the soul from the system, and a free soul cannot be owned. That is why her words were torn away, buried in the sands of Egypt, and hidden until our time. Mary taught a truth the church could never hold. She said the kingdom is not in the sky, not buried in stone temples, but within. The Gospel of Mary, hidden for centuries, reveals that salvation was never bought with rituals, never granted by priests, never owned by Rome. It was through remembrance, through waking up to what you already are. She taught that the soul rises by shedding its chains, the chains of fear, the chains of desire, the chains of ignorance. When the archons whisper despair, you silence them. When they feed illusions, you remember the source flame within. This was dangerous knowledge, because it freed the soul from contracts, from control, from the loop, and a free soul cannot be owned. That is why her teachings were torn from the record, buried in the sands of Egypt, sealed until now. Because this generation was the one meant to find them. Mary's truth was too dangerous for the system, because she proved the sacred did not belong to Rome. It lived in every soul. She was the balance to the Christ flame, the feminine half of the code. Together they revealed a union beyond control, a union of equals. The parasites could not allow that, so they smeared her. They rewrote her as the whore, while crowning Peter as the rock. They split the flame in two and chained women in silence for centuries. But the smear was not just about her, it was about severing humanity from the womb, from the feminine, from the source of creation itself. To erase Mary was to erase half of God, and the church has been feeding on that wound ever since. Mary carried more than words, she carried the bloodline, the dragon flame that Rome could never extinguish. Through her, the sacred union was sealed in flesh, the womb as temple, the body as chalice, the blood as memory. The Magdalene line was not just ancestry, it was sovereignty, a living key that kept source alive in this realm. That is why she was hunted, that is why her story was twisted. Because in her womb lived the continuation of the flame. Every child of that line carried the codes, every daughter and son became a threat to the system. This was not about one woman, it was about the future of humanity itself. Her voice was buried under centuries of lies, her teaching scattered, her name defiled. But truth does not die, it waits. And now, in this age of awakening, her words rise again. The Magdalene flame is returning, not through cathedrals, not through priests, but through those who carry the same memory in their blood, the same codes in their soul. Every woman who refuses to bow, every man who honors the feminine as equal, every soul that remembers the kingdom within. These are the children of Magdalene, the ones who will not be silenced, the ones who carry her voice into the grid of today. Rome could chain her story, but it could not chain her flame. And her flame has returned to finish what was begun. They tried to break her with labels, tried to bury her under Rome's shame system, but even their rewritten scriptures couldn't kill her flame, because her gospel wasn't just written in words, it was etched in blood, in birth, in the ancient memory of every soul who still remembers her name. They say she anointed him before his death, but what if the anointing wasn't for burial? What if it was for return? A sacred oil ritual to seal the resurrection, one only a womb bearer could perform. Because she didn't just follow him, she carried him. Not just in love, not just in body, but in blood. She was the vessel that preserved the line, the flame that wasn't extinguished at the cross. They couldn't stop the body from dying, so they tried to stop the blood from surviving. But the Magdalene moved in secret, and so did her daughters. France, Scotland, underground temples, coded relics. Everywhere her feet touched the flame left a mark. They rewrote the resurrection, made it a tomb tale instead of a womb ritual, But the real miracle wasn't that he rose. It's that she remembered how to bring him back. They thought the story ended in silence, but silence is never the end for a woman born of flame. They didn't kill her, they crowned her in exile. Her footsteps vanished from Jerusalem, but they echoed across oceans. South of Gaul, the whispers began. She arrived by sea. A boat with no sail, no oars, no map, only faith. The locals said she walked off that boat barefoot, carrying nothing but salt, oil, and the gospel of blood memory. She didn't preach, she radiated. And they came to her, not for ritual, but remembrance. They say she held a cave like a temple, lit candles from nothing, turned herbs into medicine, and wept over stones that had once held giants. Because she knew, not just the system, but the beginning before the system. She wasn't hiding, she was preserving. A bloodline, a truth, a code sealed inside the womb of every dragon daughter who still wakes up burning and doesn't know why. She didn't run from the empire, she walked through it untouched. Because Mary was never hiding, she was planting. And what she planted wasn't fear, it was flame. A living record passed not through scrolls, but through soul. After the cross, the empire watched her. They followed her, but they could not interpret her because what she carried was encrypted. A sacred flame only those with memory could recognize. The whispers say she sailed with nothing, but that's not true. She carried the most dangerous treasure on earth, something Rome could never kill. A child, not of flesh alone, but of frequency. A bloodline encoded with the key. They say the sea turned calm as she passed, as if even the elements obeyed her grief. She did not weep for what was lost. She ignited what was to come. The South of Gaul was never random. It was a portal, a place of prophecy, and she knew exactly where to anchor. Because Mary didn't carry the aftermath of a man, she carried the continuation of the mission. And the mission wasn't death, it was decoding the serpent. Not to destroy it, but to reveal what it once was before it was cursed. She knew the serpent had been rewritten, demonized, twisted into evil. But Mary had memory of Eden, and the serpent wasn't the villain, it was the trigger, the awakener, and she was its keeper. The truth was this: she didn't come to be a wife. She came to be a guardian of the original code. The flame wasn't in a tomb, it was in her womb, and it was never meant to stay buried. They never erased her, they only made her more dangerous. Because every time they buried her name, she rose in another woman's body, in another mother's blood, in another seeker's dream. They renamed her, they rewrote her, they wrapped her in shame and silence. But Magdalene was never theirs to own. She didn't belong to their temples, she didn't answer to their bishops. She didn't kneel at their altars, because her altar was the body, the womb, the water, the truth. She didn't preach from scrolls, she remembered from blood. She didn't lead armies, she led awakenings. She didn't fear the serpent, she understood it. She didn't follow Jesus, she walked beside him. Not as a student, not as a wife, but as a keeper of the code. The church tried to sever her from the cross, but the cross was never theirs. It was hers, the four directions, the womb gate, the star key, the flame point. And that flame, it never bowed to Rome, it never kissed the ring. It rose from beneath the ruins, lit candles in caves, healed the broken, and carried the code of remembrance through every age of silence. They called her the whore, but she was the holy. They called her unclean, but she held the bloodline. They called her lost, but Magdalene was never lost. They were just too afraid to follow her.